Hello and welcome. In this video, we'll be discussing domain characteristics. This video will be somewhat of a culmination between what we have learned the last 2 weeks and this week. So, we're going to be talking about domain characteristics in this video. First, let's begin by naming the three domains. The three domains are listed here. Domain bacteria, domain archaea, and domain eukarya. As you can see, under two of the domains, I also put AKA, which is code for also known as. That's because depending on what reading material you're looking at, these domains are sometimes called by different names. Domain bacteria is often called domain eubacteria. Domain archaea is often called domain archaebacteria. These are not different domains. These are the same domains. That's just like me saying, my name is Miss Duncan or my name is Miss D. I'm the same person, but there's two names. So domain bacteria can also be called or known as domain eubacteria. And domain archaea is also called or known as domain archaebacteria. There is no additional name for domain eukarya, simply eukarya. Now let's talk about the characteristics that we use to separate or identify each of these domains. The first characteristic that you learned about was whether a cell is unicellular or multicellular. We know that a unicellular cell only contains one cell. One cell is present. So only one cell is present as shown in the picture here. For multicellular, many cells are present, as shown in the image here. The next characteristic that you learned about was whether a cell was prokaryotic or eukaryotic, which simply means, does your cell have a nucleus or does it not? We know that the nucleus is where the DNA is held inside of a eukaryotic cell. Let's start with the prokaryotic cell. As shown here, a prokaryotic cell does not have a nucleus. Typically, it's a large black bean-looking thing inside of the cell. So here you can see there are no clear defined dark spots that would indicate a nucleus. So this is a prokaryotic cell. It does not have a nucleus. A eukaryotic cell is a cell that does have a nucleus. Like these three cells shown here, you can see on the paramecium and the amoeba and the euglena, you can see each of these have a clear dark area, dark circle or bean looking area that indicates that this is the nucleus. This is where the genetic material is held inside the cell. So you can see it's a clear defined shape. So usually a circle, but it can be, in the case of the paramecium, like a bean shape, but it's a clear defined, it looks different from anything else that's inside the cell. That is the nucleus. If you were to look at a eukaryotic and prokaryotic cell under the microscope, this is what you would see. For a eukaryotic cell, you can see there's a clear defined black dot here, which indicates our nucleus in this eukaryotic cell. And then you have here in the prokaryotic cell, there's no clear defined area. You can see that it's just simply free flowing DNA all over, no clear defined black circle or area that shows a nucleus. Next, we're going to talk about how an organism gets its energy. You should have watched another video entitled Heterotrophs and Autotrophs. That video went into detail about how organisms each get their energy, whether they absorb it or they um, create their own. So I won't go into much detail here. Heterotrophs and or autotrophs. How does an organism get its food or energy? So here you can see heterotrophs, they need to eat other organisms to get their energy. So they have to eat it or absorb it or put it in their body for them to get that energy. So they have to eat it or absorb it. Versus autotrophs, they use a process similar to photosynthesis to absorb nutrients from sunlight, create their own food. So this is an autotroph here, shown in the image here, where they use a process similar to photosynthesis, and heterotrophs here, where we typically see an organism eat its food. The next topic we're going to be talking about for classification is reproduction. This should be a term that you guys may or may not be familiar with, but we're going to go over it. So, for domains, there are two types of reproductions. The first type is asexual reproduction. This type of reproduction requires only one parent cell. So, as you can see in this diagram here, you have this one cell. This cell is going to get its energy whether through creating it and absorbing it in its system or through photosynthesis or through absorption. So that's going as that cell gathers energy, it's going to grow. As you can see, more organelles are starting to appear. That cell is going to continue to grow and grow and grow until we get to the second row where you can see this cell has almost doubled in size. Then we're going to continue to grow, and by now it's almost looking like there are two cells. Then you're going to see here, now there are two cells. That cell has grown in so large that it has split itself into two cells. Now you're going to see here at the bottom, finally, where we have two separate cells that are identical copies of the original cell here. So this is an example of asexual reproduction where only one parent is required to reproduce. The next type of reproduction, in this slide, you can see an example, some more examples of asexual reproduction. Here you have a cell that is growing, then it's going to split or create two sections. It's going to continue to grow until it splits into those two individual cells. Here are some examples of what it looks like under the microscope in real time. So these are examples of asexual reproduction where only one parent cell is required to reproduce. The next type of reproduction is sexual reproduction. This is the more familiar reproduction style. This is where two parent cells are required to reproduce an offspring, reproduce and create an offspring. Please disregard this here. So we have a male parent cell and a female parent cell, two parent cells here, 1 and 2, that are going to create an offspring. That is the same for bacteria. So you're going to need for sexual reproduction, you have two parent cells, simply two parent cells that create an offspring. So now let's go ahead and break those characteristics down into each domain. Domain bacteria, or as it's also known, eubacteria, is unicellular. All the organisms are unicellular, meaning they only contain only one cell is present. They are all prokaryotic, meaning every organism in this domain does not have a nucleus. They reproduce asexually, they reproduce asexually, meaning that it's only one parent cell needed, just like I showed you where that one cell grows until it breaks into two cells. And they are heterotrophs and autotrophs. That means they can either eat food or they can absorb it. The next domain is archaea or archaebacteria. And as you can see, I put a little side note here that they're just to remind you that these are found in extreme environments. They are all unicellular. They are all prokaryotic, meaning they do not have a nucleus. They are all asexual, meaning they only need one parent cell. They are heterotrophs and autotrophs, meaning they can absorb food or they can create their own food. And lastly, we have eukarya. Eukarya organisms or organisms in domain eukarya can be unicellular or multicellular. They are all eukaryotic. That means they all have a nucleus, even if it's a unicellular organism like a paramecium or a euglena. Those are all unicellular organisms that have a nucleus. They can be sexual or asexual. They can be heterotrophs or autotrophs. This concludes our domain's characteristics.